And thank you so much. Where's he gone? And thank you so much for this amazing onion. A chicken shish kebab would have killed you. It's great to be here, guys, and I'm going to launch straight in. Now, there isn't a clock that I can see. There's no way I'm going to see that. So I'm going to put my watch, my phone there, and so if I get any texts, that might be interesting. Just so that we finish roughly when they told me to finish. Hello. You might... Oh, that's nice. That's very sweet. That might not be safe there, because number one, when I get excited, I spit, and they say it's very refreshing on a hot summer's day, but maybe not. And also, if I fell over, you have no chance, no chance. I want to talk about 2,000 years ago. The world was in a bit of a mess. And there was the Roman Empire, but there were wars all around the Roman Empire, and the Romans conquered many countries and many people groups. And there was this one group of people, there was this one little nation that was kind of in a corner somewhere, and they were occupied, and they were occupied for years. And for them, that was really, really hard. And they were a nation called Israel. And everything seemed to go wrong. There was a lot of cruelty. The way they killed people was cruel. The way they treated people a lot was cruel. Yes, they did have laws. Yes, there was a semblance of civilization. But there were all sorts of things that were really, really bad. And in that place, in that time, the God who created the world, who I believe created the universe, he chose to get involved. He chose not to love us from a distance, but to love us from close. And he came down to earth, and he took the form of a little baby. And that's why we celebrate Christmas. And the God who was the creator of the universe became vulnerable and became small. He grew up to be a man. And eventually, he was crucified. He was killed in the most brutal way that you could possibly choose to kill someone. It was painful, it was horrible, it ended up by suffocation. And in between, he showed us how to live. But he didn't just show us how to live. He died and rose from the dead that he might give us the power to live like him, to give us the power to love like him. Because when Jesus Christ came, he came to show us what God is like. He came to reveal the heart of God. And if you read the stories of Jesus' life in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you see a God who is kind, who is full of mercy, who is full of compassion, who is full of goodness, who went out to the outcasts and the broken people. He went out and he loved the people who were despised by the society around them. He saw people in a different way to everyone else. And by doing that, by loving the people who society thought were the worst, what he was saying is God loves everyone. Because if he loves the ones that everyone thinks is the worst, that means he loves everyone. And Jesus, when he came to earth, he spoke good news. He talked about the coming of God's kingdom. And what that meant was when the way God wants us to live would happen, the rule and the authority of God, the kindness of God would be shown, and everything. And he spoke. He spoke about the good news and how he was good news. And the story of his kingdom coming through him would be good news, and people would be set free. And he didn't just speak good news. This is the thing. He was good news. And he was good news to so many people who were broken. He was good news to this woman that he met at a well one day. You can read it in John chapter 4. She was a Samaritan woman, which meant for the people of Israel at that time, the Samaritans were like, they were regarded with disdain. They were regarded with, like, oh my goodness, can anything good come from there? Samaritans were like they were lower than anyone else. That was how they were regarded. A bit like people from Somerset. And and Jesus met this woman at a well, and it was as if he was waiting for her. And there was a few things that shouldn't have happened. He shouldn't have started a conversation with her, because number one, she was a Samaritan. Number two, in that culture, in those days, she was a woman, and men were not meant to start conversations with women in any sort of public place that they didn't know. And thirdly, we find out in the story, she was regarded as an outcast and a sinner. And Jesus talks to her about eternal things. She's at that well wanting to draw water. Her interest is in water. And then Jesus starts to talk to her about her interest. They start talking about water. But somehow the conversation goes from water to worship. And I've always thought, how did you do that, Jesus? How did you start talking to her about water and then end up with worship? This is how it happened. They're talking about water, and then Jesus gives her a prophetic word. He reveals her secret sin. Now, this is how he does it. He says to her, well, we're having a very interesting conversation about water. Why don't you go back into your town, the town called Sychar, and bring your husband, and the three of us can continue to talk about water. Now, she's embarrassed at this point because she knows, she thinks, this man is the first man that has treated me with dignity and respect, like I'm a proper human being for as long as I can remember. It must be because he doesn't know my story. It must be because he doesn't know my past. And she says a half-truth, which is a lie. She says, sir, I have no husband. And this is where Jesus reveals her secret sin. He says, you are right when you say you have no husband. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're now living with is not your husband. You are quite right in what you say. And I love the way Jesus reveals her sin. Let me just say it again in a slightly exaggerated way, just to make the point. He says, you are right when you say you have no husband. Put a tick by the no husband answer. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands, which is a little more than the quota allowed, and the man you're now living with is not your husband. You are quite right in what you say. And this woman whose sin has been revealed, she's standing there thinking, I got it right. You see, God hates sin because of what it does to us. He hates sin because it hurts us and it hurts those around us. But do you know what? Every bit as much as he hates sin, he loves sinful people. He adores bad people. He thinks the world of people who get it wrong. That's how I got in. Isn't that how you got in? He loves us as we are. And he came to show this woman that he knew the worst about her and he still loved her. And this woman goes back into the town, and she's the outcast of the town. But she goes back into the town and she says to everyone, come and meet a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the one we've been waiting for? The one who is to rescue us, the one that's to liberate us, the one who's to set us free. And the whole town came out to meet Jesus. And when they met him, they believed in him. And the first evangelist ever to Jesus Christ was a sinful Samaritan woman who had 5 husbands and couldn't be bothered to get married the 6th time. And I love that. I love that. And you know what? He was good news to her because he treated her with dignity and respect. And he did that again and again and again. There was this guy called Zacchaeus. And he was this little guy, and Jesus was going into his town. And as he was walking into Jericho, all the important people were at eye level. They were all there, ready, the reception crew to meet Jesus. But little Zach, he's called a chief tax collector. That doesn't mean he was high up in the civil service. That means that he sided with the occupying Roman power against his own people, and he took money from his own people and kept some of it from himself. So he was a chief traitor to his own people. He would have been despised by everyone. And Zach, who knew what people thought of him, he climbed a tree so he could see Jesus, but not be seen. He never expected to be seen. And Jesus walked into town, and there were all the respectable people. But you know who he saw? He saw Zach up the tree. And he stops everything and he says, Zach, come down. Today I'm going to come out and hang out at your house. He said it in front of everyone. And Zach's life was turned around. Zacchaeus said, you know what? I'm going to give a whole load of my money away. And if I've wronged anyone, I'll give them back 4 times the amount. You know, his life was turned around. There was this woman who was caught, can you believe it, in the very act of adultery. And the legalists, they brought her to Jesus and they threw her down in front of him and they wanted to catch him out. And they said, it says in the law, it says in the book of the law that we're to stone to death any woman caught in the act of adultery. What do you say? And Jesus says, yep, that's true. And then he says, let the person without sin throw the first stone. And then he starts writing on the sand. We don't know what he wrote, but one by one, the men dropped their stones and quietly walked away. I suspect he was writing their secret sins. I suspect, I don't know. And then Jesus looks up and there's just him and the woman. And he says, where have they gone? Is there nobody left to condemn you? And she says, no one. And he says, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Go and start a new life. And do you know, when she said, there's no one left to condemn me, she actually got it wrong. Because there was one left to condemn her. The only one who had the right to condemn her. Because the only one without sin. The only one who lived a perfect life. And that was Jesus. And what does he say? He says, I'm not going to condemn you. And she was set free. Her life was turned around. And you know what? It's funny that we know that in the church as the story of the woman caught in adultery. What a crazy title for that story. It should be known as the men caught with stones in their hands. It should be known like that. You see, Jesus was good news. He was good news to broken people. He was good news to hurting people. At the end of the first chapter of Mark's gospel, Mark's version, Mark's story of Jesus' life, a man with leprosy comes to Jesus and he says to Jesus, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus says, I am willing, be clean. And he heals him there and then. But you know what? When the man with leprosy says, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Before Jesus says, I am willing, be clean, it says in the Bible 3 words, Jesus was indignant. Jesus was indignant that this guy said, if you're willing, you can make me clean. Why? Because I think Jesus was like, wanting to say, what are you talking about if I'm willing? There's bits dropping off you. You're a social pariah. You can't have any friends. You're in agony. You're emotionally broken. Everything is wrong with your life, and you're asking if I'm willing. We clearly haven't met yet, because you wouldn't ask such a question. Of course I'm willing. Be clean. Of course I'm willing. I want to set you free. Of course I'm willing. And this is God. He hasn't changed his mind. He wants to set people free. He wants to liberate people. And he wants to do it through his church. He wants to do it through us. We're meant to be, we're called to be a people of mercy, a people of grace, a people of love in a world where everyone seems to hate each other, in a world where people just want to be nasty to each other. We're called to be an alternative society, and we're called to go out there and as an act of worship, not simply evangelism, to show the world a different way of living. And that's what we want to do next April with The Noise. We're hoping that we're going to bring hundreds of young people from all over the country to Bristol, to your city, to work with you and your churches and to tell people the good news about Jesus, but also to be good news, to be such flipping good news. We want to tell people with our actions and not just our words. And we're going to be here for 5 days or whatever it is, 6 days. But you and your churches, you're here for good. You're not going away. And we want to be good news to the world around us. And you know what? That can be in big things and that can be in small things. We want to do big projects and little acts of kindness. Do you know sometimes it's the little acts of kindness that make all the difference? Sometimes it's the little acts of kindness that change people's lives. We don't need to wait, guys. We don't need to wait for a big project to come along. In fact, if we do, if we're not living it beforehand, it won't be real. We want to do it now. And I just want to encourage you, as I want to encourage myself, just to find ways of just, in a random way sometimes, just to be kind to people, just for fun, just to be nice to people. I was, a few years ago, I was in South Africa, and there was a team of kind of young people from my church who came with me. And I'd just given a talk about generosity and being generous. And I said, I gave an example that I'd heard of a pastor in America who, whenever he came to a toll booth in the road, and this was the days when they had people in toll booths, he would always, as just for fun, he would always pay for his car and for the car behind. And then he'd drive off, and that would be it. And I said, wouldn't that be amazing if we as Christians, we were just known for our generosity? And even if we weren't known, we didn't have to then have Jesus stickers on the back of our cars. We paid for your toll. Did you realize that Jesus paid for your sin? Not to do anything like that, but just to do it because we're meant to be nice, because God is nice and he's our Father and we're meant to resemble. So I talked about that. And would you believe it, the next day, I was driving the minibus and we were on a motorway and we came to a toll in the road. And as we came to the toll in the road, this guy, James, who was sitting next to me, he turned to me and he said, well? I said, well, what, James? And he said, are you going to do it? I said, do what? He said, are you going to pay for the car behind? To my shame, I found myself saying, James, that was a sermon illustration. We don't do that. In the minibus, nobody said anything, but I could feel their eyes burning my skull. And then I said, all right, I'll pay for the car behind. And as soon as I unwound the window, I started getting excited. And I said, hello. I want to pay for us and for the car behind. And I paid, and then I drove off really slowly. And we were all looking, I was looking in the rearview mirror, and they were all looking back, and I said, what's going on? And they said, the woman in the toll booth, she's explaining to this family that we paid for them, and they're all looking like this out the windows to see if they recognize us, and all of that. And I said, what's happening now? I said, they've started driving. I said, get ready, guys. They're going to come up on the outside lane. And of course, they were going to pass us because I was driving really slowly. And I was going, and then they said, they're coming. And then they came alongside us. And the whole family went like this. They went. And I found myself going. And I loved it. And we got really excited. And it was like, wasn't that fun? Well, a couple of days later, we came to another toll in the motorway. And they didn't need to tell me. I said, hey, we are going to pay for the car behind. And I unwound the window and I said, I'm paying for the car behind. And then we drove off really slowly and I said, what's going on? And they said, there's a man in the car behind and the toll attendant has told him that we've paid for him. I said, what's happening now? He's leaving. I said, get ready. He's going to come on the outside lane. And then he came on the outside lane and I turned to him and I went, and he drove straight past me without looking. And I was furious. I wanted to chase him and get my money back. I thought, we just paid for you. You couldn't even say thank you, you ungrateful git. You. And the words of Jesus, don't throw pearls before pigs, came into my head. And it was like you. And you know what? Then I suddenly realized that's not the point. The point isn't how they react. The point is that we do it as worship to Jesus. That we're kind and generous to people who say thank you and people who don't say thank you. To people who know we're Christians and to people who don't know we're Christians. To people who care and people who don't care. Because God loves everyone. He loves everyone. And then I'll just tell you one more story because this is fun. I live in a town called Watford. And our football team's in the Premier League. Yeah, you've got 2 football teams here, haven't you? Yeah, okay, we won't talk about that. But ours is in the Premier League. And I live in a town called Watford, and there's a shopping centre in the middle of Watford. It's not very good. And it's got these automated car parks. But until a little while ago, there was another car park that was a bit away that had a man in a black box in it and one of those, barriers that he would open and close. And it was convenient for me to go and park there. So I would regularly go and park, and as I drove in, I'd come to the barrier, and I'd take the ticket, and I'd say hello. And he was a moody man. And he would go, Ugh. All I ever got was, Ugh. And then I went and parked, and then when I came back with my shopping, I'd go to the barrier with my car, and I'd give him the ticket. He'd tell me how much it was. I would pay. I would say thank you. He would go, Ugh. He would open the barrier, and I would drive off. And that was our relationship, basically. So we did that for a while. And then there was one day, I remember, it was this day in July, and it was an amazing day. The sun came out, and it was hot. And as I was walking back to the car, I started to get thirsty. So I went into this shop to buy a Diet Coke. And as I was buying a Diet Coke, I suddenly thought of the man in his black box. And I thought, oh, he'd be very hot in his box. Maybe I could buy him a Diet Coke. And then I started thinking of all the reasons why I couldn't. He'll think I'm bribing him. He'll be embarrassed, da-da-da. And then I knew that it was actually that I would be embarrassed. So I thought, you know what? I'll buy 2 cans of Diet Coke. And if I don't pluck up the courage to give him one, I'll just drink both. And so I went back to the car. I got in, and I drove to the barrier. And I gave him the money. I gave him my ticket. He told me how much. I gave him the money first. And then I waited until the barrier came up. And then it was my moment, because I could just escape. And I took all my courage, and I took the can of Diet Coke, and I said, this is for you. And I put it on his shelf. And he looked at it, and he said, what's that? And I said, it looks like a can of Diet Coke to me. What do you think it is? And he said, why? And I said, well, I just thought, I bought myself one, and it's a hot day, and I thought you might be hot in your little box, and I thought I'd buy you one. And then I got embarrassed, and I just drove off as fast as I could. Well, a few weeks later, I went back to that car park, because I avoided it for a few weeks, and then I thought he might forget. And as I arrived to take my ticket, he saw me, and he said, hello there, it's nice to see you again. I haven't seen you for a few weeks. I was amazed. Could one of the stewards... I was amazed. Do you know what I realized? They don't forget you when you buy them Diet Coke. And I was so pleased that when I was on my way back, I thought, this time I'll buy him an ice cream. So I bought him an ice cream, and I went there, and I gave him my ticket. He told me how much I paid. The barrier opened, and then I was there with the cone underneath, and I said, this is for you. And then I drove off, and then I for age, I just kept buying him things. I bought him chocolates, I bought him I bought him everything. After a while, they had to build him a bigger box. Now, I would love to tell you that one day, that man fell to his knees in his little box, and he said, you have been so kind to me. I want to become a Christian. How do I do it? And I would lead him in a prayer. That didn't happen. One day, I arrived at the car park, and there was another man in the box. And I said to him, what happened to my man who's in this box? And he said, oh, he's been transferred to another car park somewhere else in the country. And I thought, oh no, I'm not starting all over again. Now, I don't know what happened to that man. The nearest we got was one day he asked me, we were chatting, and he said, what do you do? And he said, I said, I'm the pastor of a church in Watford. And he asked me about the church, and I told him a bit. And I remember all he said was, you know, if I ever went to church, that's the sort of church I think I might like to go to. But he never came. He never came. I don't know what happened to him, but I like to think that whatever black box, in whatever car park he ended up in, God might have whispered to one of his kids, go on, buy him a Diet Coke. Buy him a Diet Coke. Just to be kind. Just to be kind. Now, I know these seem like little frivolous things, but you know it's the little things that sometimes matter, not just the big things. You're right, was that hiccups? Would you like a drink? Are you sure? Okay. You want a drink, but you haven't got hiccups. Come here. You gonna come? No, I just want to get you a drink. You just no. Stand up. Do you want to stand? No. All right. Can someone just get? She'd like a drink, but she hasn't got hiccups. So just a drink is on its way. Look, he's going. He's going to get you a drink. But you can have a sip because you have got. Oh, here we are. Share it. It's only water. Well, she's got hiccups. And hey, you see, like that. That was, see how kind I was? It's just like, Jesus. And you know what we want to do as I come into land? What we want to do in the next year at the Noise is we just want to demonstrate to this city of Bristol, where there's been a history, there's such a heritage in this city over the years of Christians loving people. Lots of you know the story of George Muller. I just had dinner in one of the homes that he had, that was an orphanage that he was involved in starting up. And we want next Easter, starting the Tuesday after the Easter Monday, we want to just be good news. We want to be good news to the city around us. We'd love you to join us. We'd love you to help host the young people that are coming, because we want to tell people about the good news of Jesus and his love. Because those of us that know Jesus, we know how wonderful he is. We want to declare it. It's time for the church to leave the building. It's time for the church to get involved in society around and not to be afraid, and not only to tell people the good news, but to be good news. Whether they respond or not, whether they say thank you or not, we want to be that, and we want to do that.